Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Project Positive Planet. Joining me today is Leo from the Salt Chamber. How are you today, Leo?
Doing really good, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Yeah, excited to talk about salt. I have a few slides, so we'll just
Yeah,
introduce what we're doing today. So, this is Why Salt Therapy, Episode 1, featuring Leo Tonkin, CEO of Salt Chamber LLC, and myself, Stephanie West, founder of We Consulting and Caribbean We. And today is brought to you by Salt Chamber. So, Leo, tell us, how did you get your start with
yeah.
salt?
About 8 years ago, I never heard about salt therapy, and somebody introduced me to it and began to do some research. And at the time, I had a consulting company, and we kind of did a dive into the industry and realized there really wasn't an industry. At the time, there was about 12 facilities around the country offering salt therapy, and so we created a business model. And while this is often medical treatment over in Europe, where this all evolved from, here we started to penetrate the spa and wellness community. And so we began back in 2012 and 13, and that's how we started to communicate and educate and bring about awareness about this as a modality that has grown into an entire industry.
Interesting. So, what actually is salt therapy? Because
Well, yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. What this salt therapy is about is what is also known as halotherapy. Halo is a Greek word for salt. And it really is evolved from what was called speleotherapy, which was underground in Eastern Europe in the salt mines when they were chiseling and grinding salt. Ironically, they discovered during some of the plagues that they were up against that the people that were exposed to the salt aerosol were those that were the healthiest. And so that's where the first medical studies started to go. And it wasn't until about the 1970s that the Russians developed a piece of equipment where it could recreate those micron size air particles in the environment. And so above ground salt rooms started to grow. And when I got involved, really nobody really knew about it. People were doing certain things, and Himalayan salt lamps were popular. And we started to utilize it as a decor element. But a lot of people crossed that over and said, oh, the benefit comes from this beautiful rock and having a lot of salt in the room, or if you can heat it up. But that ended up being all false. That was all marketing. The real salt therapy that we're talking about is the kind of salt that you are in an enclosed environment, and dry salt particles, not moist, not wet, not quite like the ocean, which is often moist salt, but this is dry salt particles that people are exposed to, breathing it into a room or a small type of a chamber. And that's really what the real efficacy of. A lot of research around it, a lot of exciting things happening around what's happening with what we're all facing right now. And so there are facilities all over the country where they are just salt therapy facilities, a lot of spas, wellness, luxury residences. A lot of people are putting salt rooms in a variety of different ways. And so this type of salt therapy is really more on the efficacy of how it impacts respiratory wellness and how these micron particles penetrate the epidermis and into the skin.
And why do you think salt therapy is important at this time?
Well, for years we've been positioning it as a respiratory wellness, and I think it's pivotal now just because I think there's a lot more awareness. I don't think anything's really has changed prior to this, other than that there's a lot more awareness about how respiratory pathogens impact us. And what we don't realize is that every day we're being exposed to things. It's not an accident that asthma, allergies, bronchitis, COPD, cystic fibrosis, lung cancer, if you combine all of the respiratory conditions that our planet is facing and the disease that we have from that, it really is about our respiratory system.
Mm,
So it's interesting to understand where that cause is. I mean, there's a lot in the Western side of our world where we treat those symptoms with asthma inhalers, with medication. If you watch the evening news in prime time, it's all asthma, allergy, etc. But we're not getting at to the source of some of that issue. And we are breathing in the invisible every day. COVID is just making it a lot more aware and educated. So when you have these respiratory droplets or things in the air that we breathe in, how do you clean that out? What is that type of hygiene? And so this has been a wellness modality that's very complementary to a lot of the conditions that I just mentioned, but it's also in the spa world really created it more of an experience. So when you can create a beautiful room, you have a way for people to unplug. It is a non-touch service in the spa world. Salt is sanitized. So there's a lot of different things that really make a big difference for it. So a lot of ways that it's being delivered. But really, I think COVID is really making an impact in how important it is to take care of your respiratory system. So this is, while there's a lot of facilities right now that are closed, there are a lot of spas that are looking at how to reinvent themselves, as you know. Many are taking treatment rooms and making a small salt room or adding a salt booth. So this is now going to become a heightened awareness. I mean, we've been working on it for 8 years. And, when we started, there was only 12 facilities offering salt therapy, and we have done well over 1,000 projects up to date now.
So everybody's, the hot topic right now is preventative immunity and building up your immune system. Is there preventative respiratory care? So is this something that could help strengthen your respiratory system, not just cleanse it, but could it be a preventative measure during these times?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research that's been done predominantly overseas, but there's been some recent studies with double-blind, placebo, randomized testing with children that have been pre-asthmatic and how they would be in a salt room with the halo generator, which is the device that creates the dry salt aerosol, and those that are not. We're working right now with an infectious disease physician who was the first one to discover the first case of COVID in the state of Nebraska. And so this is presenting some real testing right now. So we are going into clinical trials now for how this can be utilized as a preventative measure, as well as recovery and a detox and a rehabilitation. A lot of people that have had COVID have come back from tightness of the chest, a shortness of breath. So a lot of evidence around there. And so people are taking this on as a preventative measure, as a hygiene, as a cleansing. We have athletes doing it because it's opening up the airway passages. So if you think about asthma medication that are anti-inflammatory, and as many people know, inflammation is the cause of so much of our issues. This opens up the air passages and reaches deep down into the respiratory system. So more oxygen is getting. Salt's also so there's been some testing done now that people that have a lot of salt facilities, you may have seen some people have loose salt on the floor as a kind of a experience about being in a salt room. And we had a call a couple of weeks ago with about 200 facilities. And a lot of their question was, how do we clean the salt? How do you sanitize it? You can't wash it down because it'll dissolve. And recent studies that we've just now seen that are actually studying with COVID is that COVID dies within about a minute of coming into contact with salt.
Say that again.
What happens is,
that's fascinating.
So there's some really neat studies that were done up in Canada where they're actually lining surgical masks with sodium chloride. And the way these respiratory droplets work is that when it comes in contact with dry salt, it sucks out that moisture, that liquid, get rid of and dissolving. And then when it recrystallizes, that kills the virus. So there's a lot of interesting things that are happening at the scientific level. And so people are starting to look at salt therapy not as a once in a while type of a treatment in a spa, but like at a lot of the facilities, this is something that people are doing on a regular basis. And so I think that's going to
So
be more of the practice for people.
So salt, I think, is kind of a buzzword. You've probably helped make it a buzzword over the past 10 years in your work. So how does salt inhalation therapy differ from maybe the salt rocks we see in spa services, or the salt we put in our food, or
Sure.
swimming in the Caribbean Sea? Or, I mean, I think there's a lot of different benefits, but what makes the salt inhalation different?
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks, Steph. I mean, people have known that salt has had therapeutic value for centuries. I mean, it was used as a preservative in the area. People use neti pots. I grew up and still do, gargling with salt water.
Mm.
There is some, vibrational component of Himalayan salt, for example, in doing salt baths or some skin treatments. But in terms of the benefit of what we talk about inhalation, it really comes from breathing in the dry salt particles. While there are wet salt particles that are moist, this is about dry salt particles because that's what makes it super absorbent. That's what, when you breathe it in, it helps with the mucus. So when I had cancer, as many people know, a few years ago, and I had a tracheotomy in me, and I had a lot of conditions around that, salt therapy really firsthand made a huge difference in how it cleans your lungs out. The decor, there's been a lot that people reach out to us, and we've done a lot of projects, Stephanie, that are just decor based. It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful natural stone, and I think it looks great. We've done relaxation rooms, we've done massage rooms, yoga rooms, restaurants, etc. But there's no claim to having any negative ions or cleaning the air. You have to, I mean, sodium chloride is a very stable compound. We used to think that if you heated it up, something would happen, but that's just not, there's no evidence of it. In fact, there's counter evidence to it in terms of, negative ions and all that. We've tried a lot to communicate that. There's an industry trade association that has done a lot of education about it, but because salt therapy still is not really known to the masses, there's still some of that misconception. There is the placebo effect of it. When you're in a nice room
But
and it's
back to that, Leo. So if the
sure.
salt is in the air, could it not be, as it cleanses our lungs, could it not be cleaning the air? Because I think that's one thing consumers may be looking at the future is actually the wellness of hotels or spa rooms and the cleanliness of the
Sure.
air. And they say they're coming out with tests. Will they actually be able to test the cleanliness of the air?
Yeah, no, it's great because over the last few years we've been doing a lot of work with clean air therapy, which is
Mm,
really what's up and coming now. So when we design salt rooms, there are some particular ways of how you need to design it to work with your HVAC system. And so when you get to the root of some of the issues that we have with our respiratory system, there is the outdoor air quality and the indoor air quality. And according to the World Health Organization, it could be up to 5 times worse indoors
right.
between the chemicals that we use, between electromagnetic frequencies that are in the air, just airborne pathogens and everything else. So yes, when you're in a salt room, the dry salt particles, it actually makes it a cleaner room. Salt in the room is a super sanitize. It cleans it really disinfects when anything lands on its surfaces. So you have that quality to it. So when you combine it with maintaining a clean air system, such as we're doing things now with installing UVC lights and special probiotics that get put into the air handler, I think is part of the next evolution of what we're working on. So while we created the salt therapy, we're now doing a lot of work on clean air therapy because that impacts what you and I breathe. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, climate awareness, allergy seasons have shifted because of things. Allergy seasons are much longer. They start earlier. You have raging fires in California. The quality of the air that we breathe is making that difference. It's not an accident that the longer we live, the more our respiratory system gets damaged. Why? Because we're being exposed to the elements a lot longer. So being out in nature, being in
And
clean
our world is
environments.
getting busier, not right now, but
Yeah,
as you know,
yeah,
planes speed up and we're more global, there's more stuff circulating in the air across the
sure.
world.
Well,
Um,
if people notice too, there's a lot of work that was done from satellites because everybody was in shutdown mode. The air frequently was China in the United States, in Italy, in places where they were actually measuring air pollution because nobody was out, everybody was sheltered, and you drastically saw the impact that did to the quality of the air for people. So while that's the source of the issue that we really need to get to, how can you take care of your wellness and your respiratory health today and use it as a proactive preventative measure? And that's what salt therapy is all about.
Awesome. So not to discredit the other forms of salt, but we had a good question. So there are benefits to salt massage per se, and perhaps just having a salt wall. Are there still benefits to those forms of salt therapies?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of salt on the walls, there's no evidence that does anything other than psychosomatic in terms of creating an ambiance. It doesn't clean the air. It doesn't emit any particles. It doesn't generate negative ions. So that has been, disproven. I'm not trying to badmouth anything about it. It's just those are the facts. Salt
Right.
therapy is an evidence-based treatment. In terms of massages and Himalayan salt scrubs and things that are used, there are benefits to Himalayan salt baths, Himalayan bath bombs, Himalayan soaps from a skin treatment perspective.
Mhm.
Even drinking Soleil, where you concentrated salt, where you are drinking it to help your pH balance. But in terms of heating up Himalayan salt as a rock, you can't measure the negative ion increase. And so it's just not true.
Right. So it'd probably be more therapeutic than actual health benefits. Kind of like
Yeah, I mean,
a warm stone. It's just a marketing, perhaps, technique
yeah,
for your
yeah,
place of business and a better
yeah.
fit.
Yeah, I mean, there's been, I mean, unfortunately, there was a class action lawsuit in New York against a salt plant manufacturer making the type of claims that you're referring to,
Mhm.
and they had physicists and chemists and everything on board, showing all the evidence. So, you know, we love it, and we do a beautiful salt rooms with it all the time. So I'm
Mm.
not here to say don't do it. It's a beautiful ambiance, and I guess that's where we say utilizing that as part of the experience. You
Right.
know, it enhances it. I mean, we've done a lot of projects utilizing Himalayan salt, so I think it's a great material. It feels good. It looks good. It's a stone. It does resonate and have a certain vibration frequency like all natural elements do. So when you put a
So
lot of that in a room, it makes a difference in how it feels.
I agree. So is there a difference in the Himalayan salt and the salt that's in the halotherapy?
Yeah, great question. Thanks. Yeah, the salt that you put in let's say a salt effects halo generator is pure grade sodium chloride, not Dead Sea salt or Himalayan salt.
So is that
Um,
man-made?
Well, it's not man-made. People may think it is when you hear the word pharmaceutical or medical grade, but it's salt that comes from the earth, comes from the oceans, comes from salt lakes. It gets purified, so it's 99.99% sodium chloride.
Mm.
And this is what they make saline solutions on. This is what, if you go to the hospital and you need an IV drip, this is, what is utilized to hydrate. So likewise, the sodium that we're breathing in is pure grade sodium chloride. That's the type that the Himalayan salt is a great salt to eat, and the
Right.
digestive tract is very different than the respiratory tract. There are some minerals and elements that are in these other salts, but when you get them ground up into a 1 micron size, which your hair is about 50 microns in diameter. So
Mm.
1 micron is so small. That's what allows
Leo,
into the penetrate the skin. That's where the magic comes. Oh,
you froze a little for
I hear
me.
you.
Okay, so you're saying 1 micron, you're able to inhale that more
Yeah,
easily.
I mean, yeah, and well, but even with the Himalayan salt, there are some of the minerals and elements that if you were to inhale it, some of the minerals and elements are not water soluble, so they
Mm.
will remain as sediments into your lung system. So that's why we use pure grade sodium chloride. That's what's been used in the clinical studies. And that's what you need to do in order to, as we move forward, getting this all approved more as a medical treatment for people.
And what about the Dead Sea salt?
I mean, Dead Sea salt is a great salt to utilize in spa and beauty and home use, but that has a higher oil content and contaminants, so it's not really something that you would be breathing in. There are facilities that utilize it as a decor element, but the only salt that all of even our competition around the world that manufacture equipment and with the Salt Therapy Association, the only salt that you use is the pure sodium chloride for inhalation.
Okay. So can this be added to Terry has a great question. Can this be added to HVAC systems? Have you looked into this?
Yeah, I mean, right now it can't be introduced through an HVAC system. It really is a direct feed into the room itself, or like our salt sits right on top of it, because these salt particles are so small, they really don't travel through pipes well. You do have to manage your HVAC so that salt doesn't get into it, because that's often where you have humidity, and that's where salt can become corrosive.
I learned that the hard way in the Caribbean with a 30-room spa and 45 air conditioners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So salt rooms do have to be engineered. I mean, we've had some Vichy rooms that we have converted. We have some spas that wanted to change out certain rooms and put salt rooms near the wet areas. So you have to be careful about managing the location and how to engineer the room, so you have not only an effective salt room, but you don't get corrosiveness, because salt can be corrosive. But right now you can't pipe it in through your HVAC system.
Okay. Do you think that we could give Terry credit for that in the future? Is it something we're looking to do?
Well,
Should she go right now?
Right, we'll give Terry the credit for that one. But what you
Yeah.
can do, what we do have is some probiotic solutions that get emitted through the HVAC system. So when you look at pumping other elements to clean out the mold, to get rid of the bad bacteria, but keep some of the good bacteria, there's some things that we can share with people later on about how you can put probiotics through your HVAC system.
Interesting. I've only known probiotics from the oral solution. So Kimberly Acker, who's in beautiful Anguilla, I'm so jealous right now. She's relaunching the spa at Belmont. Right. They're actually building a new facility. She has a great question. She went to your website, I imagine saltchamber.com, and there is a salt bed. Can you explain the benefits of this salt bed?
Yeah. So back in 2000, where are we now? I don't even remember. It's been 2013. We introduced the first salt bed, and this was where we actually had a halo generator attached to a chamber that you lie down in, and you receive the treatment as well as your skin having the treatment. Since then, we reconfigured it where you still put a halo generator on a small room, but instead of a standard massage table, you have the Himalayan salt embedded into the salt bed. It's heated up. It doesn't really have the benefits of anything other than that as an experience. So there's a different experience when you lie down in the salt, and it's part of the whole wow factor, if you will, of different type of body treatments. There are some facilities that have the bed and they don't even use a therapist. They turn the halo generator on, and someone's there lying for about a 20 to 30 minute respiratory treatment and skin treatment by being exposed in the salt room. You know, you put some sound therapy to it. So it's part of the experience. But in terms of the benefit of just Himalayan salt alone, that's where it differs.
Mm-hmm.
There are facilities that a lot of facilities have converted massage or treatment rooms into a small salt room and have used a standard massage table inside so that somebody can go in and relax. And even they're doing what we call salted massages, where the therapists are in the room giving a massage, with the dry aerosol being dispersed in the room. You can't overdose from it, so the therapist can be exposed, for a few hours on a daily basis. Keep in mind, the salt miners were underground, hours every day, day after day, and so you really don't have that effect with it.
So I have an interesting story about salt. So when I moved to Turks and Caicos, it was one of the originators of the big revolution during the American Revolutionary War, when they were pulling all the salt from the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos to preserve the meats and whatnot. It came from there. So they have these beautiful salt ponds still in existence where you can go and like rake the salt. So I was creating my own products from the salt there in Turks and Caicos. So I did quite a bit of research on salt. Have a big passion for it as well. Leo, you froze.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back. What did you say?
Okay. No, I said I'd love to. I mean, there's the big salt flat Bolivia and places all around that have some beautiful salt destinations, like in Walisca, Poland. In fact, we were supposed to be there this week, where the birth of salt therapy really came from last year. We had a symposium there, and it's always right at the beginning of May. So right now marks we had to cancel that event, obviously, but there's some great places all over. In the Caribbean, salt gets imported here, as you know, right here to South Florida all the time. And there's a lot of salt scrubs being made with it, and a lot of cool products.
Awesome. So Kimberly had a follow-up question. Can you lay directly on that salt, and are you having to change it per client, or how does that work, since that we know it's micro?
We know that it's antimicrobial and antibacterial. In terms of direct laying on salt, specifically like the grain salt, typically there is a thin sheet that people are laying on. It's more from the perception and experience of the customer. Is salt antibacterial? Yes, but when you lay on it, if you were you didn't have your clothes on, the grains kind of mark you up, and they actually will stick to you. And even though
like going to the beach,
like going to the beach. So with that being said, a lot of salt rooms have salt on the floor that people are doing yoga, or in the children's salt room, the children are actually playing with the salt like it's a sandbox. And now with COVID going on, obviously there's not going to be that much of open salt rooms that have strangers in them, or people, being with smart distancing and all. And it was a real challenge to understand, can you go back and play with the salt again? And while it is antimicrobial, and that we're learning that COVID can be killed within a minute, we're still taking the extra precaution of people not being directly onto the salt. That's why when they walk into a salt room, they have disposable booties, and such.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this too, I mean, psychologically, we're all thinking about COVID constantly, and it's going to be with us for a while, and taking extra precautions and distancing and things like that. Christine Clinton said, "I love the idea with children playing with the salt." He's our partner with Global Wellness for Children.
It is. Yeah. Well, and the children's salt rooms have been really popular in the facilities. I mean, they have these beautiful wall murals. They make it look like a beach scene. They have toys. The parents sit around the perimeter. It's like a play date. And here the kids are breathing in the salt air. And a lot of children go through being pre-asthmatic and having conditions. So a lot of research around that. Whether when we start again and having children playing with each other, to your point, I think is going to be part of what we need to see what happens. But that's how, up until then, how children's salt rooms work. We actually have salt rooms in child daycare centers. So when they have play dates or nap time, they're in a salt room.
I love that. And we work a lot with the hospitals as well, like Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital in Miami and things like that. It would be so therapeutic to see children being able to enjoy that. So we have a few more questions. Leo, can you talk a little bit about infrared saunas with Himalayan salt and your thoughts on those?
Sure. Yeah. We first introduced taking our halo generator and putting it with infrared saunas and traditional saunas about 6 years ago. And what we've learned, and we still do it today in terms of the infrared, the challenge that we tell people is you can use it as an infrared or you can use it as a salt therapy. When you combine it together as a treatment is where you need to be of caution, because if you are using the infrared and you come to the temperature of sweating and you've got dry salt aerosol in that environment, then that dry salt aerosol is not going to penetrate the skin. And actually for the guests, they're going to get really sticky, salty skin that's going to then harden up on them. So they really got to be able to wash that off. You could still get the respiratory benefit, but by also introducing moisture from sweat into the environment, you start to minimize the efficacy of the salt therapy. So it's great to do it as a either or type of a multi-purpose unit. Doing it together, you need to make sure what temperature and what type of infrared you're utilizing to really adjust how it can be effective for you.
Interesting. And then Jen Templeton had another question. Do you think salt rooms will ever go back to no booties for those of us that have salt on the floor? Or do you think this will be the new norm with booties?
Well, the Salt Therapy Association has always advocated to people should have some foot coverings on. That's why people need to take off their shoes, and they should have booties and or socks. While I do know in practicality, there may be people that have taken off their shoes and socks and be barefoot in them, or same with the children. That really is not a protocol that should be followed regardless of COVID, even though that's done, out there in the marketplace and what people are doing. But booties have always been what the Salt Therapy Association has recommended.
Unless we like yourself have our own personal salt room and it's only in contact.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I mean, that's it. I mean, the problem that you have is that somebody has open wounds on their feet. All right. When you start looking at it from an OSHA or health perspective, is where you have some issues. So do people do it? Yes. But according to, quote, the strict interpretation of the codes, people should have foot coverings being on the salt.
And right now we're recommending you go above and beyond whatever codes are to protect yourself, your staff, and your guest. Another question from Carrie Beckham. Does the number of people in a salt room depend on size in terms of still being effective? So say you have a 10 by 10 or a 20 by 20 room, is there a recommended number of people in that room for effectiveness?
Well, let me answer it this way. The size of the room, the cubic volume of air determines the length of a session, because you have to have so many salt particles per cubic meter of air space. That's the first thing. So in rooms that are larger than 150 square feet, typical salt sessions for efficacy are 45 minutes. And the halo generators are programmed based on the specific measurements of the room. Rooms that are smaller than 150 square feet, such like many treatment rooms, are done in 25 minutes. So those rooms can be turned twice an hour. Being in, let's say, one of our salt booths, that same efficacy can be accomplished in just 10 minutes. But in terms of the number of people, right now, obviously there's going to be smart distancing. So you're going to need to be able to have separation between guests. And not only that, I think initially when they start, when people start to reopen, as much as many of the salt therapy facilities deem themselves as essential during this time to be providing recovery from COVID patients, I don't think that strangers, people that don't know each other, are going to feel comfortable going into a room with other people. So there's some new designs that we're doing with people where they are going to more of the salt booth way, because people are going to want to get salted. And a lot of people don't have an hour to schedule all the time. But if I can come in 10 minutes, I can come in on a weekly basis or be able to build this as part of my routine, great. Are converting small rooms into 2-person rooms where they're coming in as either individuals or coming with their couples or with a child and a parent, people that know, how they know each other. Still separation, but there's a lot of different ways that things are being adjusted right now.
That's interesting. So, a lot of times people will go and work out and steam or sauna before. So that could be something as well. They come for your yoga class or whatever regularly scheduled fitness you have, and then get salted before or after. Could be an upsell.
Yeah, I mean, spas are utilizing salt therapy, one could be a standalone revenue generator. So it's a great thing for spas that haven't had it to be able to bring in a whole different marketplace in their community by really educating them about respiratory wellness and hygiene. So you're going to be able to pull in people that may not have been coming to your spas, and it's very minimal consumables. It costs pennies and salt a session. And so you do want to get people to come in and frequently and buy packages or memberships is a lot of the model. There are a lot of spas that are putting this in as an amenity, as part of what they provide. And we've done a lot of projects like that. There's a lot of concierge and residential communities that are adding, country clubs are adding.
Well,
we're even doing it in assisted living facilities.
Well, I would think even in a high-end resort or community, as we all start to try to figure out our marketing plans and our story and how we attract businesses, we've added this in as a benefit to your health and your care and your wellness because we care about you. I mean, that would be great because brand.
Yeah, especially when people come back, start traveling again. I mean, being able to, after you be in an airplane with the air that's in the airplane and coming to a new environment where often the atmosphere, the grounds, the allergies, the different trees and grass and the types of places that you are traveling to or from can affect your respiratory. So being able to offer somebody that in your spa when you first arrive and throughout your stay is a way that a lot of places are utilizing it.
Interesting. So, and if you were a spa coordinator or manager, what would you recommend to someone? Like, how many minutes, how often, what would be the ideal recommendation for someone to get salted?
Well, it's sort of almost a trick question. It's like, how often do you want to work out? How often do you want to do yoga? And there are protocols that have been established over in Europe, but to diagnose and prescribe by inquiring what somebody might have in terms of allergies, and then suggesting they come in 2 or 3 times a week for the next 3 weeks is really prescribing. And unless you're a licensed medical professional, you can't do that. So the way that a lot of the facilities are doing that is really how it's impacting you. You will feel a bit of a difference even after the first session. We have people that are doing salt therapy on a daily basis. We do a lot of personal homes, kids and adults that have cystic fibrosis, that their whole life is about being 6 feet apart, can't go to a public salt facility. So they're doing salt therapy on a daily basis. Right here in our showroom here in Florida, many of us are doing it on a regular daily basis. But from a hygiene perspective, you have people that are doing this on a weekly basis. And they're also doing it, let's say when they're doing it with yoga. We have dozens and dozens of facilities out there that have a halo generator attached to their yoga room. So while they're doing their Ayurvedic breathing or different styles of yoga, you have this added benefit, just like there's hot yoga, there's salt yoga. And so you can't overdose. We have athletes, like I said, are doing it pre-workout, post-workout.
Oh, it's got to be amazing for them and reconditioning them, building their.
Yeah. I mean, we're actually doing salt therapy for racehorses. They're tremendous athletes, and their performance and endurance is incredible. So we're building stalls that are salt rooms as well as trailers.
Very cool. So I guess there's still some confusion about the size and the duration of the room.
Sure.
So you recommend for a salt chamber less time because the salt air quality is more concentrated versus if you were in a huge room.
Yeah, the time it takes to fill up a larger room of salt is more of a time of air. When you look at, what is the room dimensions of a room and how long it's going to take to create the right amount of micron-sized particles per cubic meter of space, that's where that sort of formula comes from. So over 150 square foot room, okay, 45-minute sessions. For rooms that are 150 square feet, which your typical treatment rooms may be 10 by 12, 12 by 12 or whatnot, those can be 25 minutes. In our salt booth, which is more of an individual, where it's only about a 3-foot by 3-foot kind of a cabin and booth to sit in, that's about a 10-minute treatment. You could extend it longer because you could adjust the concentration. So if you had a smaller room, but you wanted to create a 50-minute treatment, or what, is an example, you can adjust the concentration to allow for that more time. You just can't do it in a shorter period of time.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And if you were to recommend, if someone's coming in for a massage or facial, would they salt before, after? Does it matter?
People, if facials and skin treatments are great to do prior to a salt room, because when you remove the dead skin cells and have clean skin, your pores are more open, more susceptible to receive the salt going into it. So many people in spas, what they do is they create packages. So while you have salt therapy as an amenity, you have salt therapy as a standalone treatment by itself, you have now packages and signature treatments where you could be doing an exfoliation, and then in the salt room, you can do a facial or skincare, and then in the salt room, likewise with the massage, some are doing it combined at the same time. Many people are getting salted first, getting into that relaxation mode, and then going to get a massage. So there's different ways that we've worked with our customers in developing some of those type of signature treatments.
And is it relaxing for those that haven't experienced it? I know it's relaxing to me, but when you go in, what do you feel like when you're in the space in the moment?
Well, I mean, I think that's the beauty of the salt therapy, where you design these beautiful rooms, you have these beautiful chairs. Many are incorporating sound therapy. A lot of people, they fall asleep. Such a relax, and so the benefits of the stress and anxiety that we all are going through, and there's no electronics allowed in a salt room, so you're not in there with your cell phone or your doing anything. It really is a time to disconnect, focus on your breath work and a lot of the breathing that a lot of us know about, and it's just getting into that space. So it is very relaxing. In fact, there are some issues with some salt rooms where people fall asleep and are very loud snorers.
How much salt is too much salt? Can you oversalt?
Well, there hasn't been. I mean, one of the questions a lot of people ask is, if I have high blood pressure or hypertension, or I'm supposed to be on a low sodium diet, how does that affect? And right now, there's been no studies to prevent it. Again, the respiratory system is very distinct from the digestive system. And these particles are so small. A lot of people, if they haven't been in a salt room, it's not like you're walking into a room that's like a steam room where you see this cloud of salt all over. These particles are micron sizes. Unless you hold up a laser or a light, they're almost invisible to see, which is what we are dealing with COVID right now. There are things in the air that we do not see. And it's not just COVID. There are other pathogens, dust mites, things that if you saw, you would be really concerned that this is what you're breathing in when you're inside or outside, which is why we're really promoting the respiratory hygiene side of this all.
Very good. And what's the right temperature? So say you get a salt chamber, you build a salt room, what temperature ideally should that room be at?
Yeah, Temperature in a salt room can be whatever is comfortable. The biggest issue is humidity. So humidity is what you want to control, and you don't want humidity to be over 40% inside of a salt room. But in terms of temperature, it really depends on your HVAC system and what you want to make as comfortable. Some salt rooms have made them cooler. Obviously, there's no actual benefit. Some people may have seen pictures of salt rooms where people have blankets on, but if you don't expose your skin, you're not going to get the skin benefit, which is why a lot of spas like the salt booth or like doing a small treatment room conversion, because then people will feel comfortable to disrobe, because if people have eczema and rosacea or psoriasis, with that, this has tremendous benefit in reducing the inflammation when it's exposed.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I know when I was little, they would say, we're going to throw you in the river, throw you in the ocean. Salt will cure anything. So
Right.
It's got to be great for the skin as well. Now, are people adding essential oil? Can that be done in the salt room?
The thing you have to be careful with, if you put essential oils or aromatherapy into the air, that can be problematic only if you have people coming into the room and they were allergic, and the smells are lingering on. If it's essential oil for a massage, that's different. What a lot of facilities do is they'll do a treatment with, they have the halo generator on, and for the first 15 minutes, the guest is by themselves, just breathing and relaxing. Then the therapist comes in and provides, let's say, a massage, and then the halo generator goes off, and then they can start utilizing lotions and oils like they normally would. Because if it was utilizing that with the salt aerosol, the salt would just get stuck with the oil on the person's body.
It wouldn't feel that great. Yeah. So Cindy Marino had a great question. What happens if it's too humid? Because we work with a lot of Caribbean properties, so controlling that humidity in the air has to be a challenge for you in Florida as well, I'm sure. Does it change what you're breathing in? Does it break it down, or what's the reason of managing the humidity?
Well, there's ways of managing the humidity. So we work with engineering on the HVAC side to make sure that it's not going to be a humid room, whether that's a dehumidifier, where the halo generator is placed in the air intake it takes in. So without getting too technical, there are ways to design it. I mean, we have salt rooms that are in the Maldives, that are in St. Thomas, in Mexico. So a lot of climates, most places have conditioned air. We're doing a couple projects now that we're building outdoor structures, let's say in Costa Rica, where it's not part of the main facility, and we have designed the right air system, the HVAC system, to maintain temperature and humidity, so it's effective for the salt therapy. So depending on what their condition, their certain HVAC makeup is, we could look at it and kind of engineer the solution for them.
And the reason why is that when the salt is wet, it's not as effective.
Yeah, that's why the drier the salt, that's why often next to the halo generator where you are replenishing the salt that you're utilizing, we recommend putting it, let's say, in a crock pot and leaving it on warm. Because this salt is so pure, anybody that knows that if you leave salt out, it starts to get hard. That's why restaurants put rice in their salt containers, or how it becomes more, so salt is so absorbent.
We just did that in the country.
You don't want it to crust up.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah. So that's why, so if you had humidity in the room, it's going to absorb, and that particle is going to lose its ability to be absorbing and killing the bacteria and the virus. So you need to have dry salt, which is very distinct from moist or wet salt.
Interesting. Okay. So we're kind of passing through our questions. I have one personal question, because I think the biggest focus right now for hoteliers, spa and wellness professionals is how we're going to restart, what we're going to restart with. So for existing businesses, what would be a couple solutions for them to bring in salt therapy to their business? Because we've just learned of all these wonderful ways that can help their clients.
Yeah, there's really a couple ways of adding or converting. existing rooms or spaces. The simplest is utilizing a salt booth. These are devices that can fit in a very small footprint. Many spas put it in an existing treatment room or an existing space with another chair there, and people, the guests come in, they sit in the salt booth for 10, 15 minutes. They can expose their skin. You don't have to do any modifications to your HVAC for that particular room. You could put up some decor panels and salt, and you could be in business right away with that. If you were converting a room, we have to evaluate the type of ceiling you have, because if you have drop-down ceiling, the salt aerosol could escape and cause corrosion. So we'd have to take a look at that, as well as there's a couple things that would need to be done to the actual air vents that are in that room.
But that sounds pretty
But
easy
you
for
could,
what I know on the development side.
yeah,
Just, and
yeah,
I'm sure
it's
you've done
very
it.
simple. I mean,
Yeah.
drywall. I mean, we do it all the time. And so depending on the room, a lot of facilities have multiple treatment rooms, and they are being concerned about utilization and capacity right now and reopening. So
Absolutely.
to easily put in a salt booth, plugs into a standard outlet, uses very low power. Maintenance on it is maybe 5 minutes during the whole day, and your consumables are minutes. And then the ROI on it, for those that are using it as a revenue generator, right now, the average salt session in the United States ranges from $45 down to about $15 a session. So for $25 on average, if a facility had a
That's what you're
salt booth,
charging. 40. You're
yeah,
charging 45. Okay.
we're not, the facility would be charging
Sure.
that, right?
Right.
So let's
And the
say
cost
are
per
averaging,
treatment?
I'm sorry,
And what's the cost per treatment?
uh, about a nickel.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we can talk to our
Okay,
controllers and our GMs about that all day, or spa owners.
right. Well, I mean, keep in mind, this is you're not touching anybody, you're not utilizing any labor,
Mhm.
your consumables are low, the benefits to the customer, and when you look at the ROI, if you did one person an hour in an 8-hour day, that's $200 for the day times 30 days. That's $6,000 a month in additional revenue.
And
If
I
you
bet
only
you
did,
almost paid off your chamber.
yeah, exactly. Well, it is, and that's what a
Yeah.
lot of people are doing. So it's
Right.
just a matter of the education and the ramp up. I mean, even if you did 4 people a day, you're still bringing in $3,000 a month in revenue. So from a CapEx perspective that people are looking at, you do have to look at the whole picture right now. Doing a salt room is probably a small salt room. You could do it all with probably $10,000 or less. Same thing with the salt booths. So that's part of that equation. Other people are looking at other parts of their facilities where you can take a salt booth and put it into an empty area. You don't need to put it into an existing room. Some have put them into relaxation rooms. Some have even put them in lobbies.
That's what I was thinking. Now could be the new normal. Get off the plane, go in for your salt treatment while they get your room ready. If
Yep.
you arrived early, could be a nice welcome
Yep.
amenity with your
Yep.
sanitation towel. Very good.
Yep.
So we just have a couple minutes left. So you want to recap, Leo, just for everyone? We had a couple people jump on late. Why do you
Sure.
love salt, and what do you think are the health benefits?
Well, I think salt is something that people are familiar with. So there's not a big curve for people to understand that there's some therapeutic value to it. I do think there's an education about people understanding what dry salt therapy is all about and
Mm.
how the benefits of it being anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and antiviral, as well as being super absorbent to be able to pull out the toxicities that we have. So the wellness matters, hygiene matters. COVID-19 right now has really put a spotlight on our respiratory wellness. So this modality can be offered in so many different ways and has such a far reach to so many people, from young and old and everybody in between. So I think that, for 8 years now, we've been really pioneering, educating, and bringing awareness. And we're seeing that growth spurt starting to happen in all across different channels, from the entrepreneurial startups to the local day spas to the higher end resort and destination, to destination tourism with wellness, to residential communities. So it has a far-reaching impact, and it's been around for a few decades, but just here in the States, maybe about the last 10 years when we started. And I just think it's real easy for people, and it's an enjoyable experience, and it works. And so it all lines up. It's just a matter of people really understanding the mechanics behind it. And the Salt Therapy Association is a great resource. They have trainings. They have all types of pre-printed materials to help educate. I know at Salt Chamber, we do staff trainings, and if anybody's online and they want us to participate in any of their meetings and talk about this or help present it, we have all types of presentations and can help really walk through both from an installation perspective and an operational side as well.
And I think it'd be a nice welcome back too, if it sounds like you have some existing clients on this webinar, to say to your staff, hey, we know you've been through a hard time. Please come in and get salted and feel good, and help your respiratory system before we all start to get back to work.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of our salt therapy facilities are trying to do. In fact, many of them are going to be offering free salt sessions for all first responders and healthcare providers, and really starting to look at offering sessions for just people to come into the community, to come to their facilities. So there's a lot of groundswell going on right now, and I think it's a real pivotal time. And I think if people aren't doing salt now in their facilities, they soon will be.
Wonderful. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I thank you, Leo. I have learned so much. I thought I knew everything there was to know about salt therapy, but apparently I did not. So Leo Tonkin, again, he's the CEO of Salt Chamber LLC. We will share his information if you have any interest in following up with him. The company is Salt Chamber, and this is a Project Positive Planet webinar, and it's a collaboration with 3 other great organizations if you would like to check those out, which are wellworld.tv, sharing fun and educational content around wellness, We Consulting and Caribbean We, as well as Papilia. So thank you again, Leo. This was so fun, and we're going to do this again. We're going to have a little...
Yep.
So if you guys have more questions, we're going to have additional expert speakers on salt and all the wonderful benefits. So I thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it too.
All right. Bye, Leo. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye. You too.